In the 14th century, the richest man on earth was not a European king, he was not a Roman emperor, he was an African ruler named Mansa Musa. When he traveled to Mecca in 1324, his caravan crossed the Sahara carrying so much gold that he gave it away across Egypt, completely crashing the local economy and dropping the global price of gold for over a decade. At its height, his empire, the Mali Empire, was one of the largest and wealthiest on earth. Its crown jewel, Timbuktu, was a world center of trade, wealth, and deep learning. So here's the question we're answering today. How did a continent that was once home to some of the wealthiest, most advanced civilizations on the planet become today associated with widespread poverty and underdevelopment? The answer is not what you were probably taught in school, and it begins by destroying a myth. The story most people silently absorb is that Africa was always poor, a dark, disconnected continent just waiting for Europeans to arrive and develop it. That story is completely false. For centuries, West Africa sat on top of some of the richest gold deposits on the planet, and the empires that controlled them were massive. The Mali Empire was founded around 1235 by a legendary leader named Sundiata Keita. At its peak, it stretched across roughly 1.1 million square kilometers of West Africa, an area significantly larger than Western Europe. Mali's wealth came from brilliant geography. It controlled and taxed two things the medieval world could not live without: gold from the mines of the south and salt from the mines of the north. In the medieval world, salt wasn't just a seasoning, it preserved food. Entire economies depended on it. And Mali taxed both sides of the trade. When Mansa Musa took the throne, ruling from 1312 to 1337, he didn't just hoard this wealth, he invested it. He brought architects from Spain and Egypt to build the great Djinguereber Mosque in Timbuktu, a massive structure made of earth and wood that still stands today, nearly 700 years later. Timbuktu became an intellectual magnet. Islamic scholars, international traders, and thousands of students poured in. The city's Sankor institution grew into a massive center of learning, with libraries housing thousands of manuscripts covering astronomy, law, mathematics, and history. And keep in mind, this intellectual boom was happening while much of Europe was still dragging itself through the Middle Ages. Mali wasn't an isolated anomaly either. It slowly declined in the 1400s. New power rose to replace it. The Songhai Empire, which grew even larger, capturing Timbuktu in 1468 and expanding the vast trans-Saharan trade networks. So let us absolutely clear before we go any further. Pre-colonial Africa was not an empty, backward void. It was a continent of organized states, universities, international trade, and immense wealth. So what changed? Two distant forces completely broke Africa's historical trajectory. One was internal. The second was catastrophic, rapid, and external. First, the normal cycle of history. After Mansa Musa died, Mali's leadership fractured. Succession disputes and civil conflicts tore at the empire. The Tuareg seized Timbuktu in 1430s. Songhai took it next. Then in 1591, a Moroccan army carrying gunpowder weapons crushed the Songhai military and shattered the last of the great West African empires. And at the same time, something quieter was killing the economic engine underneath all of them. European ships had begun sailing directly down the African coast, bypassing the Sahara entirely. The trans-Saharan trade routes that had made Mali and Songhai unimaginably rich were suddenly obsolete. Civilizations rise and fall. Rome did it, Persia did it, China did it repeatedly. If this had been the end of the story, Africa likely would have rebuilt and reunified, just like Europe did after all the fall of Rome. But then came the second force, and it completely rewrote the future of the continent. By the 1800s, Europe was industrializing at breakneck speed. Factories were exploding across the West, and they were starving for raw materials, rubber, copper, palm oil, cotton, and oil. Africa had all of it in abundance. As late as 1870, European powers controlled only about 10% of Africa, mostly restricted to small trading posts on the coast. By 1914, Europe controlled roughly 90% of the entire continent. 90% in just about 40 years. History calls this the Scramble for Africa. The defining pivot point happened in the German capital. From November 1884 to February 1885, representatives from 14 countries, including Britain, France, Germany, and Belgium, sat around a horseshoe-shaped table at the Berlin Conference. On the wall hung a massive, blank map of Africa. Not a single African leader was invited. No African nation was represented. With rulers and pencils, these men drew straight lines across an entire continent to settle their own colonial borders. Those lines cut directly through kingdoms, ethnic groups, and ecosystems that had existed for centuries. They forced historical rival groups into the exact same artificial borders and split unified societies entirely in half. Many of those exact arbitrary lines are the national borders we see on the map today. But the borders were just the frame. The actual system inside them was pure extraction. Colonial economies were never built to industrialize Africa. They were built to hollow it out. Railroads were aggressively laid down, but if you look at historical maps, they didn't connect African cities to one another. They run in straight lines from inland mines and the plantations directly to coastal ports, designed solely to ship wealth out to Europe. Local industry was actively suppressed, so the colonies would be forced to buy finished goods from Europe. Education systems were intentionally kept minimal, and wealth generated inside the continent flowed structurally outward. By the late 50s and 1960s, a wave of independence swept the continent. African nations successfully won their freedom, but they didn't inherit the thriving organic empires of Mansa Musa. They inherited the artificial borders drawn in Berlin. They inherited fragile economies designed exclusively for resource extraction, which instantly became the structural fault lines for the political instability, coup, and civil conflicts that followed. As Tanzania's first president, Julius Nyerere, later observed, African nations were artificial units carved out at the Berlin Conference, suddenly forced to build stable societies out of systems designed for their own exploitation. Now, history is complicated. Modern historians debate the exact weights here. Internal governance failures, systemic corruption, Cold War proxy conflicts, and geographical challenges all play massive roles in the modern landscape. The post-independence era has seen its share of local mistakes, but no serious historian denies that the structural impact of colonization fundamentally crippled the continent's economic foundation. Where does that leave Africa today? The picture is far more complex than a single label of poor. Africa is not a country, it is 54 distinct nations, each moving on a totally different trajectory. Some of the fastest growing economies in the world are right here. The continent has the youngest, most digitally connected population on Earth. Take Botswana. When it gained independence in 1966, it was ranked among the poorest places on Earth. Today, it boasts one of the highest standards of living in Africa. The difference wasn't luck, it was choices. They built strong legal institutions, carefully managed their diamond wealth, and actively resisted the resource curse that trapped many of their neighbors. The path forward exists, and many nations are craving it out right now, but the historical scars are stubborn. Many African economies are still caught in that colonial trap, exporting raw, cheap materials while importing expensive finished goods. The borders drawn in Berlin still spark tension. The core takeaway is this: the poverty we see today was not natural, and it was not inevitable. To a massive extent, it was engineered by specific decisions made by specific people at specific moments in time. When we look at modern Africa and assume its state is just the way it has always been, we erase centuries of brilliant history. We erase ancient civilizations like Egypt and Carthage. We erase kingdoms like Aksum in Ethiopia, which minted its own gold coins when most of the world could not. We erase empires like Mali and Songhai, centers of learning like Timbuktu, and global trade networks that thrived long before a group of foreign powers sat around the table in 1885 to divide a land they had never even seen. If you want to understand the world as it is right now, you have to understand exactly how it was made. That is what this channel is all about. Hit subscribe and I will see you in the next one.